Welcome back to our how-to series on the Climatiq Excel add-in. In this video, we will look at how you can reduce the number of hours you're spending on matching emission factors to your business data using our Autopilot feature within Excel. We understand that scouring through multiple emission factor databases online and trying to match thousands of lines of activity data to the correct factors is a tedious and time-intensive approach. Manual mapping and makeshift databases of possible emission factor matches aren't going to live up to the auditor's standards. That's why we built a solution to directly address the problem of emission factor mapping. Our machine learning model, the Autopilot, handles the heavy lifting for you. It automatically transforms free text input into fitting emission factors across scopes 1, 2, and 3 for quick and easy data mapping and emission calculations. With just a few inputs within Excel, like a product or activity description, and an optional set of filters to narrow down your results, you'll get a list of suitable emission factors. You can ask the Autopilot to search specific emission factor datasets, for example UK base, XIO base, or to prioritize certain regions and years, or to only search for either spend, weight, or volume-based factors to ensure the results will fit your input data. From a data quality perspective, every chosen emission factor will have an associated confidence label titled as Accept or Review. This represents how closely correlated your product description or input activity is to the recommended emission factor, and is intended to provide data quality guidance to you as a user. This is determined by the level of relatedness in the words and associations with your text input. As an example, if you require emission factors for gasoline, Autopilot will provide factors related to the identical search word, as well as other related items and activities. Similarly, if you input the word laptop, Autopilot will be able to deduce that this is associated with computers, and also provide detailed emission factors around laptop types. This is where the context-aware element comes in. Let's look at how Autopilot functions. We have two options, either the Suggest or the one-shot estimation. We will look at Suggest first. Based on your input data, for example, the phrase industrial mill, and your filter settings, the Autopilot Suggest will return a list of suggested factors. The results include a label showing the confidence or similarity between the input text and the matched emission factor. From here, you can select which emission factor is the best suited to your use case. Autopilot will then perform an emissions calculations with the factor that you selected. Alternatively, if you want to simplify your Autopilot usage to just one step, you can use a one-shot estimation. For one shot, Autopilot will match, select, and calculate the results in one go. There's no need for you to select a fitting factor. One shot will automatically perform the calculation using the factor with the highest confidence label. That's a crash course overview of how Autopilot operates. Now let's walk through an example. For some of these examples, I will be using the Climatiq template file, which you can find in the Templates tab of the Adding task pane for an easier workflow. However, as always, you can implement the formulas in your own workbook in any format you desire. It's totally up to you. Let's start out by looking at the one-shot estimation, which is a great tool when you have very clear input data available and want to get bulk emissions results without much manual review. The formula is Climatiq.Autopilot, and you can input any free text along with an amount and a unit. There are many optional fields that you can also specify to add granularity to the outputs, such as the year, the region, source, specific source dataset, access type, LCA stage, GHG scope, region fallbacks, and inflation adjustments. Let's create some input data for testing. We start out by providing a text query where we enter any product name or description. For example, if you purchased some steel, we would enter steel into the text field. Next, we define the amount and unit of the amount. So let's go with 100 kilograms of steel. From there, everything we provide is optional. For example, we can add in the region as Germany or the year as 2024 and add inflation adjustments too. If we're open to other regions being considered, we can write true in for the region fallback. If you're a bit less flexible with using factors from other regions, enter false. I'm not concerned about which dataset the emission factor is from or the LCA stage, so I'll leave these fields blank. To start, click on an empty cell, click equals on your keyboard, and then select the Climatiq Autopilot formula from the list of formula options. Alternatively, you can insert the formula directly via the task pane. Then select each input one by one, separated by commas or semicolons, completely depending on your Excel settings. You can close off with a bracket and hit enter on your keyboard. Within moments, the formula returns an emissions estimation. Before we review the outputs, I always recommend clicking the Add Header button in the task pane to label the columns. It makes it a lot easier to read the results. Let's dive into what the output means. We start with the total kilograms of CO2 equivalent. This shows the estimated emissions for the activity. Next, we have the name of the emission factor that was used, followed by the specific Climatiq activity ID that it's linked to. Then we can see the source that provided this emission factor, as well as the year and region that it applies to. Each factor also comes with its unique ID, which you can look up in our Data Explorer or use the search by ID formula within Excel to add enriched audit details. After that, we also include any data quality flags, which indicate the reliability of the data. You'll also see any inflation adjustment that's been applied, and a confidence label showing whether the result should be accepted as is or reviewed further. Finally, any assumptions or data limitations made during the calculation are shown in the notices column, giving you a transparent view of if there were any missing data points, fallbacks, or assumptions made in the calculation. You can also use the autopilot for spend-based emission estimations. For example, if all the data here was spend-based data in euros, we can simply change the unit from kilograms to euros using the 3-letter currency code. Observe how the new unit has been accounted for and how the outputs change accordingly. Now let's assume you might be dealing with more complex input data, for example, very detailed or ambiguous material names. In this case, Autopilot's first match might not always be the most fitting. Here's where the Suggest capability comes into play. Rather than making an instant emissions calculation, Suggest will return up to 20 fitting emission factor results, so you can choose between them manually. We've laid this flow out nicely in the Suggest sheet of the Climatiq demo template, so I'll use this as guidance to demonstrate how to use the formula. In addition to the input text, you can also specify the number of applicable emission factors to be shared, the unit type you're interested, for example, spend or weight. You can filter for relevant factors based on the year, region, source datasets, access type, and more. However, you can also use the formula with only free-form input text, such as just an activity name, service, material name, and so forth. All extra filters are totally optional. As we can see, Autopilot then shares a narrowed down table of emission factors that match our search term and criteria in the table below. The emission factors are displayed by ranking, so the factors at the top are more likely to be a good match. To then use the suggestions in an emissions estimation, you simply copy the suggestion ID of the factor that you'd like to use, scroll down to the table below in step 2, and paste it into the left-hand side column. From here, you can either enter the amount and unit associated with the input, and using the estimate suggest formula, you can make the final calculation, which will provide the emissions estimation. Remember, you can also use the autopilot formulas in your own Excel files to build custom setups that best fit your use case. Let's dive into the last autopilot example, the extended version of the suggest flow. This brings together the capabilities of the suggest options with the scalability of the one-shot matching. In this demo sheet, a lot of data aggregation and processing is happening in the hidden columns, so feel free to take a look if you're interested to learn more. But for now, let's just dig into how you can work with it. As before, we specify our input query and the list of filters. In the hidden sheets, the suggest formula will then retrieve the top 5 results for each entry and populate the suggestion selection with these factors in a convenient drop-down format. You can then select the factor that suits your use case best from the drop-down, and this is the factor that will be used in the carbon calculation. As a next step, You then input the relevant amount, which will trigger the final emissions estimation using your selected factor and the specified amount. That's how to do automated emission factor mapping based on your business activity data within seconds. To learn how to use other Climatiq formulas, you can watch the next videos in our Excel How-To series. I'll see you in the next video.